How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Good. Thank you for being with us today.
It's a privilege.
And thank you for your service. What I want to start out with really is kind of the beginning. Where you were born and what got you into the military. I am remembering that your father was in the Navy and kind of what catapulted you to get into the military.
I was born in 1941 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My father was in the military at that time. He saw me when I was about 9 months old for the first time. I grew up as a Navy junior, sometimes referred to as Navy brats. Okay. We moved to a lot of places, and he was a dental surgeon in the Navy. He often served with the Marine Corps. In Vietnam, he was Chesty Puller, a very famous Marine general's dental surgeon.
Oh my goodness.
See?
Oh, that's
And he
amazing.
was Fleet Marine Force Pacific dental surgeon. He loved working with Marines. And as a result, everywhere we moved, I was running around with my friends who were all Navy and Marine Corps juniors, and one of them became Commandant of the Marine Corps. I mean, we were all headed toward the military. I wanted to be a naval aviator, flying off aircraft carriers. So, in my junior year of high school, I mean, I built all the models like you do, and every time I got a chance to look at planes that were Navy planes at an air base that he was stationed at, I'd take up the opportunity. But in my junior year of high school, I already had an appointment lined up at the Naval Academy. Junior year, blip, glasses. It's over.
What?
You cannot fly a military airplane, a fighter especially, if you wear glasses at that time.
Now what about contacts?
If you have the ability to fix your eyes and then pass the tests, because the tests for naval aviators, ENT, eyes, nose, throat, are very, very tough. Okay, so as a result, I had to change my way of thinking. I'd had tutors all the way through high school, and at this time we were living in Chicago, and I was going to a prep school called Notre Dame High School that took athletes from Chicago, taught them to read and write, and sent them to Notre Dame University to make money for the alumni, that sort of thing. And but I had my last tutor, a Father Sandonato, and you always come, maybe one or two teachers you really get close to, and he was one of them. So I told him, I said, Father, I'm just going crazy. My father will not even give me a hint as to what he think I ought to be. He just cares, about the fact that I have good character, blah, blah, blah.
Well,
like that
okay.
It goes. And so finally I said, but I've got an idea, Father. I'm going to apply to a different school for a different thing, and whatever school I get into, that's what God wants me to do. So I did. And he had a smile on his face. I'll never forget that smile. Well, I came back at the end of this, experiment. The problem was I had this bad look on my face, and he said, what's wrong, David? What's wrong? Father, I got into all of them. So now I'm right where I started, and my father told me he was only going to pay the money on one.
Well, sure.
And I had 2 weeks. If he didn't, then I was not going to go to college. I was going to have to take a year off and get oriented, get a job, do something. It was a good thing to do.
No, I'm sitting here as a parent.
Oh, he was
I'm
a
thinking,
very wise man.
This is very good advice.
He was a very, very wise man. But anyway, so he said I said to Father Sandonato, I said, Father, you got to help me. He said, I rarely do this, David, but you're good in science, you're good with people, okay? You're a Jesuit kind of kid, so you ought to go to Georgetown and be a doctor. I said, okay, I want to be a doctor.
That simple.
It was that simple, because I had finished all the grieving of not being a pilot.
I wondered, you didn't touch on that very much. That must have been very disappointing.
It was really hard, and there was no way out. I mean, if you could be Jesus Christ, then God the Father couldn't get you on a Navy airplane if you had glasses. If he had glasses, you couldn't get on the airplane. So I knew it was over. I mean, I just had to adjust to it. So then what happened was I ended up getting a Navy scholarship, basically reserves, very special program. And they paid, to go to medical school, I paid $750 a year, which is unbelievable. They also made me an ensign on active duty my senior year. And I was married and had my first child. So it just fell into place. Like all of a sudden, Father St. Donato must have known something that this was supposed to be.
Well, he apparently did.
And when I got into, I was working all the time when I first got in medical school. And I began to get, kind of stale. So I called my father one day and said, Dad, if I have to work this hard every day, I don't want to be a doctor. But I've got a plan. I always had these crazy plans. I'm going to take 2 days off a week, 2 nights off a week, and 1 day off, except during exams. And if I do okay, then I'll be a doctor. Well, what happened was, I went right to the top of my class in surgery and finished number 1 in surgery. Because your brain needs a rest, needs a break. And so I went into the Navy and did my internship at Bethesda Naval Hospital, just up the road.
Sure.
I met a fellow by the name of Fred Leiss who was interested in general surgery. I was interested in orthopedic trauma surgery or open heart surgery. And but I always knew that great surgeons were made in war. So I told him, I said, we're regular Navy, Fred. If we go to the commanding officer and we tell him you got to send us to Vietnam, to NSA Hospital, Naval Support Activity Hospital, the largest hospital in I Corps, the busiest. And all the guys that were drafted were being sent with 1 more year experience than we had. But I told them, I said, look, we're regular Navy. You got to treat us a little different. If we get over there and get over there first, and the chief of the department's happy with what we're doing, then you have to let us have it. So that's what we did. And I ended up doing trauma surgery in Vietnam.
Now, whereabouts in Vietnam was
Da Nang.
Da Nang.
It was in I Corps, the upper part. Okay, it was the largest city in I Corps. So, and that's where all the naval embarkation was going on. The largest and busiest airport, okay, in the world, happened during the Second Tet Offensive. And I was there for the Second Tet Offensive.
So what year are we talking about?
It was 68, 69.
68, 69, okay.
Okay. And it was just an incredible work, seeing things I never thought I'd ever see before. And it changed my mind about a lot of things. 1, war is insanity. But 2, when you're a surgeon, it does so much to have you be able to think and make decisions, okay, that you have to make. There's no way out. So you had to be a surgeon with a lot of principle, a lot of experience. So it really paid off. When I came back, you get your first choice coming back. So I picked Bremerton Naval Hospital across from Seattle. Prime duty. And there, I was, in the surgery department the first year. And also ran the emergency room with this guy, Fred.
Oh, so the two of you stayed together.
The two of us sort of stayed together. And we told the commanding officer I'd let us run it because he's having too many complaints from the people who use the emergency room. And since we're regular Navy, we know how to treat them. So he let us both do that. And so we did that. And the next year, he went general surgery. And for my last year, I did orthopedics. When I got out of the service, I didn't realize what a commodity I had become without even knowing it. I got into 2 of the biggest, best programs for transplantation. MCV had Medical College of Virginia in Richmond, had the largest transplant grant in the United States at that time. David Hume had transplanted the first kidney. Richard Lyer had come up with the operation for transplanting the first heart. I was on his surgery team. But there was something wrong. I looked at these guys who stop hearts and restart them, and I said, these guys don't have families. These guys have divorces. They don't have relationships with their kids. So my daughter, it saved me. Because I played with my daughter every day when I was in the military. This whole thing. So anyway, I told them that I was going to go with orthopedics. Those guys could really, it was the takeoff of really high-tech surgery for orthopods. And so that's what I ended up doing. And I was in the reserve still.
Okay,
So I was still connected with the military for about 3 more years after I got out of my residency and came here to practice. And I was with the Marine Howitzer Battalion. But they treated, my father was right, the Marines treat their doctors very well. I just had to go in on that weekend, do my rounds, see the patients I had to see. They'd let me go home by the telephone so I could study. It was great. It's great.
Now, when you were in Vietnam, what was your day like there?
Well, the
Tell
Second
us
Tet
about some of those
Offensive.
experiences when you were there.
Okay. always the second Tet Offensive was the biggest. We worked for 3 days without stopping. They fed you as you scrubbed your hand. When the chief nurse saw your eyes closing, she'd say, Doc, you're going to take a 20-minute power nap. And I'd mastered the power nap in my residency. You learn to do that, you know. And so I'd lay down.
A paranap.
Yeah, a
little mini nap.
Yes, a mini nap. Then you get up and you work again. But you saw more things happen in that time, because that hospital, when we could take 64 really severely injured patients at once, 4 helicopters, they were taken care of by corpsmen. 64, I mean more than that, a lot of corpsmen working, with 2 doctors, a triage doctor who was an experienced surgeon, and the medical doctor who made sure that their medical condition was good, which it always was. They're young troops. And they got them ready for surgery, and then we operated, you know, until it was all done. Then we make rounds. So it was really, except for your day off, which came about once every 5 days, okay, you were working all the time. And you were seeing, there's a couple of things that happened, though, that I never forgot.
Okay. That's
First
what
thing,
I was getting to. You know what
First
I was
thing was the guys that were triaged, they weren't coming home. These guys were really hit. They put them in a special place where you kept them comfortable. The chaplains were called. Okay, in fact, they worked there most of the time. And they weren't yelling and screaming about pain. They were moaning. And do you know the 2 people that called out the most? God and their mother. They also said, tell my wife and kids I love her. That was almost a script. And that always moved me, you know, big time. And then the other thing that was really amazing to me was my corpsmen. If I had heroes, they were corpsmen. These kids, 19, 20, 21 years old, volunteered to crawl out under any fighting condition, you know, whatever was going on, okay, to save that Marine. And they didn't realize, and I realized something when I went to Georgetown, my major was biology and philosophy. Best course I ever took was natural philosophy. I was an all-boys school then. I'm so old. Boys' colleges, girls' colleges,
Sure.
Okay. So the Jesuit came in and he said, gentlemen, if you want to learn how to live your life, take a walk in the woods, okay, as long as man hadn't touched it. Then he said, also remember this, gentlemen, everything's controlled by economics. You have to decide what currency you're going to deal in. But remember, money and material is the lowest unless you raise it up to help other people, but that's still not the top. The top is true self-esteem, universally affirmed. Lately, Teresa Calcutta. You never heard anything bad about that lady. In fact, men reached for their checkbooks to be part of her. You know, it was really nice. But these corpsmen, they never realized what they were doing until they walked into a Marine bar when they had time off. They'll say, I'll take a beer. No, you won't. You can't buy beer here. They said, what do you mean? I'm 20 years old. A Marine walked up and he said, you're our doc. You lay your life on the line for us every day. We buy your beer. And that guy said he felt a thrill that they never forgot. When those guys came back, many of them went into medicine. They wanted to stick around where there was a doctor out of Duke University over there, and he missed those corpsmen so much. Nurses wouldn't take him in. Nobody would take him in. So he started the first PA school at Duke University.
Wow.
All the first PAs were corpsmen or medics. Now, I had one fellow, in fact, we just did at St. James up the road, we did a Veterans Day for their kids. And the guy helping me happened to be a Navy SEAL corpsman, which is the highest you could go as far as laying it on the line. And he had that personality. You can run into them all the time. They're there to say they're givers. They're the one type of person. And so, beside that, it was a lousy war.
What were some of the more memorable in terms of soldiers you were, I mean, things that you saw that you had to fix? I know you did a lot of that.
Well,
there was...
we were capable of having 4 surgeons work at the same time. We're working on this guy that was in a overrun camp. And whenever your camp was overrun, there was only one rule. Hit the deck and don't move, because we shoot everything that moves. So you had to stay down. Well, this one guy came in, and it was obvious that he didn't get to the deck fast enough. And I'm operating on his right shoulder. And all of a sudden, I feel this smooth object. And it was a grenade that didn't go off.
Wait, in his shoulder?
Oh, yeah. They have what they call the M79 grenade launcher. It has to rotate 3 3/4 time with great centrifugal force to arm it. So I figured it must have done that. So I told him, I said, I just need 1 corpsman anesthesia and the rest of you leave. We're not going to wait, okay, to stop all this surgery, to have all the people who take all these ordinances out of here. So we were able to be very careful, took it out, walked it to a bunker, walked it in the bunker, put it down, and got out of there. The whole time I was thinking, Davey, this is either a real good thing you just did or the dumbest thing you've ever done in the world.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, but those kind of things.
And you probably didn't even really, well, you had to think about it, but I mean.
Well, I had the choice right away, but I knew who was waiting out there. And you don't want to wait when you got kids that hit this hard. So I figured a way to do it. And the point I'm making is that I never had that planned ahead of time. I had moments of inspiration that guided most of my time there. Most of my time. And when you're in that kind of a life and death situation, you see guys that either can't make it. 1 out of 10 of our physicians had trouble adjusting to this kind of stuff. So it was either alcohol, it was something crazy. The rest of them were amazing. Just amazing. So when I came here, to show you how it did pay off, when I first came to Little Culpeper.
And how many years ago was that? Because you've been in Culpeper for quite a while.
I came here in 75.
Okay.
There was a kid by the name of, I think his name was Blake Thompson, or Blair Thompson, a 2-year-old, on his father's lap on a lawnmower on the side of a hill. The mower starts to tip. He reflexly throws the kid up the hill so he doesn't run over him. However, that rights the mower. He runs over and cuts his leg off just above the knee. Now, I was called to the ER, came in, his mother was there, and I looked and I said, this is really bad. So I thought I'd cheer her up by telling her all the advances we've made because of amputations and surgery. She had the biggest tears I've ever seen. She said, you got to try. And a doctor walked in at that moment and said, I'll help you. I'm trying to think of his name. He was an Irishman. There was an OB doc here. Can't think of it right now. But anyway, anyway, 8.5 hours later, we put the whole thing together. Growth plates. You got to always sew the veins first. Sew the veins together, the arteries together, everything. 4 operations later, I didn't transfuse them because I didn't want to anticoagulate them because you don't clot when you bled down that far. Mm-hmm. I just followed all these things I learned in intensive care. Okay, when you're taking care, really hit kids, you know, that are really out there. And as a result, he ended up going to Woodbury Forest, played on the tennis team, Clay Thompson, played on the tennis team, and went to UVA. And then after that, his knee was pretty well worn out. Those kind of knees aren't going to last long, but enough to play tennis. And so he ended up ultimately getting a total knee. But that all came from going to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. If I'd have just come out of MCV, it wouldn't have happened. I helped so many surgeons up the road down here when they had big, big cases. You need help? Sure. I come in and says, I can take care of this. I can do this artery. I can do this. I can do this. And I wasn't a certified vascular surgeon, you know, but I could do it, you know, and so I just did it. And that was my whole deal. My whole deal was, it started by going to war. My father was 34 years in the Navy, 36 years, 4 wars. He lied to get into World War I. He was 17, and he said he was 18. Well, those guys would just look at him and say, yeah, he'll pass. Okay, he'll pass. Mm-hmm. You know, and he was on a wooden subchaser. So the Navy was part of me. And I would have stayed in the Navy, but the war really messed up their residencies, training. Mm-hmm. It was just trauma. And you didn't get to do the big surgery because it was all boarded out of the Navy into the veterans hospitals. So I got my Navy training of the ones out of the war at MCV. We had an incredible VA program where we took care of a lot of guys.
So your dates your dates of active service in the Navy, I know you because you mentioned you were over there in '68. So what?
Well, that was I graduated from Georgetown in '63.
Okay.
So then I got in the reserves, '63 till '78.
Wow.
So, but
And how long were you over there in Vietnam with them?
1 year.
1 year. Wow.
You could
Do you
go
have
back.
any idea of how many men men and maybe and women that you worked on during that time?
I've got the foggiest. But I'll tell you one thing. One of the hardest things for me, whenever I give a tour here, I take people to Monticello. If I take them to Washington, it's got to be on a Sunday, and we leave so we get to the memorial, Vietnam Memorial, at 9 o'clock. You can park on the road right there. And what bothers me more than anything, what do you think it is? You see everybody looking at those names. I see the date I got there, the date I came home, and I don't remember any of them. They came through so fast.
I was going to ask you if there were any that you stayed in touch with, or that
No, there's only 2 I remember. 2 little girls. We accidentally, in the middle of the night, B-52s bombed a friendly town. And whenever that happened, we picked them up. We sent our choppers and corpsmen in to get them. Then they brought them to our hospital, because the Vietnamese hospitals, they would let them wait till the next morning, and those that lived, they'd treat. So we brought them home over there, and this one girl, again, had a leg just about off. Other girl had an arm up in the shoulder. And I asked my chief, Leo Quinn, trained, Northwestern University, really well. And I said, this was not a busy time. We had lulls before wasn't a busy time. So I said, we need this. We did that to her. I need to learn. You can teach me. So I think we ought to keep these 2 kids. What do you think? He said, well, you cleared that with the commanding officer. So I had a way of talking. We're regular Navy.
I'm not surprised.
We're regular Navy. So you got to let us do it. He said, sure, go ahead. So we operated on the girl with the hip about 3 or 4 times, that arm about 3 times. And then it was funny. They hung around. They call our little hooch kids, okay? And they hung around. They were friendly, and it was really nice. I got up one morning, and both were gone. And I said, well, what happened? I said, don't you know that in our hospital, at night, all the Vietnamese are with the enemy. They're Viet Cong. During the day, they're with us. Okay? So these people knew everything that was going on. And they knew when they were well enough to go home. I still have their picture on my dresser.
How old were they?
The one was probably about 5 years old, and the one a little older than that was about 6, 7. But that's why I say war is insanity. Even the Second World War was insanity. Hitler was really insane. Yeah, we just had to respond to that. There was no choice. But when you see people, making orphans, making widows, every time, it's really, I read a lot of John Sloan Coffin. Okay, he was chaplain of Yale 18 years. Great Episcopal, great writer like C.S. Lewis. And he said, every time you drop a bomb on a city, you make enemies for 3 years because you've killed mothers, children, not just the enemy. That's why our rules of warfare, when we handle the enemy, when we capture them, we handle them with great dignity. Okay? So what we do, okay, and where we make enemies of all the Arabs, there's no way that any Arab here, okay, feels close to us. It's not going to happen. It's the worst thing we've ever been part of over there. And so we got to get out of there. And the defense minister of trying to think which one of the Arab countries it was. Iran. He just said, if you all would have left us do it, it had already been done.
Yeah.
And so I'm very sensitive about war. You know, having been there, but to serve this country is just incredible. The best thing that we have is that we are a republic. James Madison studied being a republic for 2 years, almost 200 republics, and they all failed. They were formed because they had something up here they grasped for. And once they got it, they took their eye off the ball and they dropped it. And our republic is so close to losing what we had that my father fought for, okay, that the reason I have my youth group, I've got my youth camp, is because they're the answer. Those kids are the answer. And Culpeper has something which is a treasure, and that is the Junior Marine ROTC. It's the only hospital in only high school in Northern Virginia. It's growing. They have 2 full battalions, okay? And one of their colonels came to our camp in the 8th grade, and he volunteered for 4 years. Has a scholarship now to UVA, and he wants to be a Marine aviator.
Yeah.
He wants to fly the F-35. And that kid, there was something about him. At the end of the summer, I called him Admiral. Admiral Dirk, good day, sir. He'd look at me. I said, you have everything that our country needs in leadership.
So your experience has definitely, I mean, set you up because you've had a very successful career as an orthopedic surgeon, and then you're very involved in the community, and your whole thing at Verdun.
That's my father.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, my dream was to own a big sloop and retire on the Chesapeake. So I tell people the big building we have, they said, this is my sailboat. We ran ashore, so I just took the mast down. And I really think that one of the answers, we ought to bring the draft back.
I was going to ask you, that was kind of where I was going to go with this next, is a sort of
And expand it.
expanded draft, or your sort of message to young people, because I know you were very sincere in everything about your service, and that kind of a message to young people about service.
I can tell you, we haven't got time, I can tell you so many stories of kids that got in the military when they saw the price of college. They went through, and then when the time was up, they stayed for what we said was the best annuity. 20 years military, 20 years just outside the military, and Social Security. But we need to spread it to men and women just like Israel, okay? Have them get their education. Bernie, I love Bernie. Oh, he's a socialist. Yeah. No, Bernie just knew we had to educate, okay? And he'd meet a moderate Republican and say, yeah, but Bernie, we got to pay for it. So if we give them 4 years of college, we got to give them, they got to pay back 4 years. And then serve the country. So simple. There's so many answers. We have lost so much common sense in this country, and the wisdom is hard to find.
Maybe we'll get some of it back. We'll see.
I think so.
I think so too. We'll see. Now, did you have siblings also that were involved in the military? Or?
Well, I have my sister, 18 months. She wasn't, but her husband was. And he was 20 years in the reserves, okay, as a helicopter pilot. And he was stationed right across the road of China Beach, the famous China Beach, Marble Mountain, in the big helicopter base. So he was there at the same time I was there. My brother, 18 years older, he was in the Marines as a air controller. And he served just the time he had to serve. There was no war going on. But he did that. So that was it. I had an uncle who was a Navy dentist, and he was just a little bit younger than my father.
So really, quite a legacy of service in your family, for sure.
I think everybody needs to get out of the town they're born in to really see the world they're living in and figure out this country. And when you see what our education system is doing, if you don't know where you've been, you cannot know where you're going. Every kid should be able to tell the story of our country. In fine detail. It was so bad when I was in school, we had to know the Maryland history. Yeah. My father would be stationed there, so I had to learn the Maryland history. But the rest of it is so important, and to serve is a great idea. that every single kid serves this country? Because we're all stuck, and one of the things we have at Verdun is we're all on a journey from me to the we to the one. We're stuck on the me. Nobody can stay in the service as a me. Mm-hmm. Those sergeants know how to get that out of you. You know? And it's good. And you know what they miss most? I'll finish with it. What they miss most that nobody talks about outside the service? Camaraderie.
Well, this is what, the camaraderie.
Yep. We had it at Blue Ridge Orthopedics. Dave Kalk was Air Force. And we decided to build a MASH unit. We had happy hour. We had ski days. We always bought the best of the insurance, everything. And we go by, 8 times a year, new $100 bills. We're glad you're part of our group.
That's
how
right,
much
because
they
Blue
meant
Ridge
to-
Orthopedic, that's another one that you really were at the beginning of.
It was good.
Yeah.
And that was called free enterprise. You have a person that makes it, you have a person that consumes it, and you have a good product. These people who make it for you are part of your family. Then we changed to capitalism. Capitalism, and we lost the middle class. We shipped all their jobs away. And out of this dark hole, since when the middle class is gone, we're gone, came Lenin and Marx. We told you so. Capitalism doesn't work, nor does communism. So we've got to rebuild it. We are so close to being pulling the scuttle. Mm-hmm. We're sinking. The kids aren't. Bernie's army, they're not. I'm not telling you they're not. And he's not sinking either. He's out right now fighting in California because our country was dumb enough, and it was, I'm going to go how bad it was, to make our Medicare where we can't bargain with pharmaceutical companies on the drugs they give us. You got to pay whatever they say. Bernie figures out that doesn't apply in the states, so he's going to start state by state and get the law changed. Bernie.
All right, so do you want to have any last word? Is there anything that you'd like to say that we haven't covered?
Serve your country.
Serve your country.
Serve your community. Family is the most important thing to focus on. Family is everything. And you serve your country to defend what our forefathers made for us. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you, Dave. This is
I love this kind of stuff.
I know it.
I love pitching this country.
Oh, I love you pitching it for us. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to our viewers out there. Stay tuned. We're going to have more of these interviews with area veterans. And if you know of any veterans that you would like to appear on the program, contact Culpeper Media Network or Culpeper Times. And we'll be glad to get them on. Thank you.
Thank you.